The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back to Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. I'm Sterling Fox, joined by Tony Gioventu from the Vancouver province, the Condo Smarts column. You can read his stuff every Sunday. Mr. Gioventu is also the executive director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia. We're talking building maintenance, doors and windows, snow shoveling, hedge trimming, grass cutting, and considerably more expensive building maintenance issues, Tony. And just before the break, you sort of threw out a scenario that I'd like to follow up on. A lot of people, and we talked about this earlier in the program, who opt for strata living, condo lifestyles, do so because they downsize out of the larger life with the kids and all of that, and whew, now we get to slide into a quieter, more affordable, smaller, more manageable lifestyle. Except we're now on fixed income. We're retired. We're at that point in our lives. And now in this new condo that we've just bought into in this older building that, gosh, at the meeting last week, we learned all of a sudden needs expensive roof work. Well, we don't have the financial latitude to be able to pony up $12,000, $13,000, $15,000 for our share of a new roof. Nobody told us about that when we bought into our building. We, honest to God, can't afford that money. So now what happens?
Yeah, well, that's a bit of the problem with people moving into stratas who aren't prepared for what the future costs are. We've dealt with a kind of a culture of thinking that condo living was carefree living for the last 40 years, right? Yeah. That's what the marketing sign said, carefree living. But it's not cost-free, and it's not necessarily cheaper. The reason you move into a condo is because, sure, you get the quantities of scale about a collective bargaining for all of these services and whatnot, but you moved into a condo so you didn't have to shovel the driveways, and you didn't have to clean the gutters and get on the roof and trim the hedges. That's part of what you pay your condo fees for. So collectively, you're hiring out these services and the maintenance of the buildings and all the service that has to be done. On top of that, you need to think of your long-term replacement. How are we replacing the plumbing in the building and the decks and the balconies and the siding and the roofing systems? Mm-hmm. And if you have swimming pools and all the upgrades associated with that, or, infrastructure within your building that's more complicated, and even things like modern energy technologies. Are you planning for what the cost of those upgrades are going to be in the future? Because they're certainly not going to be cheap. They're going to be a costly element to deal with. And so now you're faced with this overwhelming issue for people who either on fixed incomes or who have very high debt loads.
Sure. A lot of young people, this is their entry level into the housing game. It's all they can afford. And they don't have any extra cash either.
Exactly. And we're also dealing with the housing affordability issue is that, you put in $400,000 or $500,000 for your townhouse or your condo. Mm-hmm. That's an enormous amount of capital. Do you have the reserves or the resources to meet the costs that are going to be necessary to maintain that? For individual owners that are in that position where they're really at hard press, they need to visit their financial advisor in their bank first and find out what their most economic way of raising that money, because the special levy is going to come. The roofing levy is going to come. It's going to have to be paid. Right. And if they don't pay it, they will lose their home. That's the inevitability of it, is that the Strata Corporation, if you haven't paid your $15,000 roofing levy, the Strata Corporation is going to lien your unit. In a short period of time, they're going to make an application to the courts for a court-ordered sale of your unit. Really? The Strata has to pay their bills. Yes. And you have an obligation to pay your strata fees and your special levies.
Now, are there some accommodations? I mean, these people aren't cruel by nature, I don't think. If you're anxious to remain, you clearly have affordability issues. Can you negotiate with your strata council, or are they going to just want that dough and you just need to get it by hook or by crook?
Well, Strata Corporation is going to have to pay their contractor. Yeah. And where do they get the money from? It comes from you, the owners. You're collectively liable for this money. So negotiate. You can certainly talk to your strata council, but it's your obligation to pay these levies on the due dates that they're there. And if you don't do it, it's the strata council and the corporation's duty to act on behalf of the other owners to do whatever is necessary to collect it.
So all of a sudden, new strata buildings are suddenly looking more attractive to the uninitiated like me, because they're likely to need from the get-go a lot of high overhead maintenance things. They're just going to need somebody to cut the grass and shovel the snow, right?
And that's a little bit of the problem, though, because when we take that approach that it looks more attractive because it's a new building and we don't need that maintenance, we forget that within 10 years we're going to be running into some maintenance items on our buildings. And you just look at the exterior of buildings, doors, windows, everywhere you have joints, everywhere you have a connection in the building, you're going to have some sort of sealant on the building, some sort of caulking that prevents water from going into the systems, right? Right. In the first cycle of a new building, those sealants may be if stretched out, functional for 3, 5, or 7 years. That's a significant maintenance issue that should be dealt with on a new building early on. And those maintenance and service contracts need to be part of the budgets to make sure you're doing those things. But even those simple steps are being omitted. And so by the time you get to year 10, you're already dealing with some deterioration of a building system that you could have avoided by having done reasonable maintenance.
If the Strata Council of this new building is a forward-looking group and anticipates these inevitable repairs and maintenance realities, do they from the outset include in your monthly condo fees a portion that will be set aside into a contingency fund of some kind, so that when that big ticket item comes up down the road, you're not going to have to lean on everybody in your building for an unexpected 10 grand. You've been leaning on them for 10 years for $50 a month, and all of a sudden you've got this nice pool of cash.
Well, here's the analogy I always use. When do most people repair their hot water tanks? When they leak.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Most people replace their hot water tanks when they finally have failed and they leak.
That's right. They get removed. They don't get repaired.
Well, they get removed, but now you're dealing with possible insurance claims. You're dealing with damage to your building, emergency costs for replacing it. Use the same analogy with any of your building systems. Don't wait for them to fail before you repair them, because it is certainly going to cost you so much more money to do it. Reserve funds, to start with, I recommend for every Strata corporation to have a reserve fund study done by an engineer or a certified reserve fund planner, somebody who's competent to do this work, to give you a real picture of what the next 25 to 30 years of your building looks like, so you can plan accordingly. The other benefit is your reserve fund money you collect each year, if you invest it, is not taxable. And so it's the one benefit that Strata corporations get, is this savings account that can generate revenue is not taxable. That revenue is not taxable
to the corporation.
To the corporation, and it goes back into that revenue. So you can compound that over the long period of time. As
suppose now I'm going to an existing building, not a new one, and I see this terrific apartment, and it's the place I've been dreaming of. As I discuss with my realtor and the current owner, is it my right to demand the books? I need to see the books. I need to know how well tuned up this Strata Council is in this building. I need to know if they've got 10 cents, let alone several $100,000 in their contingency fund, because that's going to determine whether I'm going to buy in this building or not. Must those facts be made available to me, the potential buyer?
The financial information, the balances and the planning within the reserve funds that you have, your annual budget, all of those records are available to a buyer through the seller's agent. Okay. And so so there's access for all those records and documents, and certainly ask if a reserve fund study or a depreciation report has been done, ask if a building condition assessment has been done or an engineering report has been done on the buildings. You talk about new buildings being attractive because there's not much probable maintenance.
Exactly.
But you know what? There are a good capacity of older buildings out there that have been incredibly well maintained, that have good renewal schedules, that are just as good a buy. What it really comes down to is really the status of this building. I think we might start to see report cards on buildings, that give us a real profile of the condition of the building, the financial position, and what kind of liabilities consumers have.
Lots more information available to condominium owners and potential owners on the Condominium Homeowners Association of BC, which abbreviated is CHOA, C-H-O-A. Tony Gioventu is Executive Director of CHOA. Their website is choa.bc.ca. It's an excellent website, Tony. We have to dash. We'll catch up to you again in another month, and it'll take me that long to do just that, catch up to you. Thanks so much for this.
Thanks, Stirling. It's been a pleasure.